I have a copy of your 2021 CSIS report, and it lists off a lot of ideologically motivated violent extremist examples, but there's not one example of 30 churches being burned down in Canada last year. Why has that not been included in your CSIS public report?
As our witnesses are probably very well aware, on Tuesday in Peterborough, our leader Jagmeet Singh had to wade through a group of people who were calling him a traitor. They were hurling expletives at him.
So what I'm hearing from you is that both the RCMP and CSIS are not aware if anyone's been arrested as a result of the BC Coastal GasLink pipeline. I find that a bit surprising that you wouldn't even be aware. You could not confirm or deny. It just doesn't seem that you're paying very close attention to it.
My next question is actually following up on my colleague, Mr. McGregor's question about attacks on politicians as well as public officials.
I have a copy of your 2021 CSIS report, and it lists off a lot of ideologically motivated violent extremist examples, but there's not one example of 30 churches being burned down in Canada last year. Why has that not been included in your CSIS public report?
Thank you very much for the question. However, my organization is the Integrated Threat Assessment Center. I think your question is probably more for my colleague, Mrs. Anderson.
Okay, but are you saying that it's not a threat, that 30 churches were burned down in Canada last year? This isn't under your purview? This isn't a terrorist attack?
So if you allow me to explain just a little bit the mandate of my organization and how we come up with threat assessment. So ITAC is responsible to evaluate the threat, and we do that according to a very detailed methodology. We look at the intent, the opportunities, and the capabilities of potential threat actors, and we do that
according to... Don't believe that these 30 church burnings posed a threat.
So if I may, sir, we do our assessment based on collected intelligence by other organizations. And so when we provide our
so you have any intelligence
assessment,
about the 30 church burnings?
Sir, I really think that I am not the best person to answer that question.
I just find it interesting because you do have extensive stuff in your public report about ideologically motivated extremism, religiously motivated extremism, politically motivated extremism, and yet 30 churches being burned down in Canada last year didn't merit a mention.
This is the last couple of days have been a very somber time for the NDP caucus. As our witnesses are probably very well aware, on Tuesday in Peterborough, our leader Jagmeet Singh had to wade through a group of people who were calling him a traitor. They were hurling expletives at him, saying that he hoped that he would die, and they were hounding him all the way to his waiting vehicle. This is the exact same kind of behavior that we saw littered throughout the occupation of Ottawa. And it's time for us to wake up to the fact that this kind of behavior has real physical manifestations and real threats. And I just want to know, I guess, from public safety and from CSIS, you did talk about the rise, and I'm glad to see that this issue is being taken quite seriously. But, with the rhetoric that we saw in Peterborough on Tuesday was the exact same kind of rhetoric that we saw throughout Ottawa and in the convoy in the lead up. I guess my question to you, to public safety, is, in the convoys and the rallies that we have seen, is there evidence that these have been used as recruiting tools to foster greater connection and cooperation between various IMVE groups?
I will begin, but I think the question is better placed with Cherie Henderson from the service on the data, what we understand about the threat. Certainly, there is. We don't see the terrorism threat is indistinct from other broader societal issues going on. And we have been looking to Heritage Canada and the work that they have been doing in the online hate space and in the anti-racism space. And looking to those cues about how we can best work with those bigger policy issues, and they are important. As I indicated in my initial remarks, this is a whole of society question. There are certain preconditions that have given rise to in civil discourse and the type of treatment that
Can I just interject? Because this is not the first time it's happened to Mr. Singh. We had someone from an anti-Islamic group called Rise Canada interrupt him in 2017. There was a man named Brian Kidder who followed him down the street in September of 2020, threatening to arrest him. We just had this latest incident. I guess we have this growing evidence of the threat that exists out there. And how much longer do we have to wait before we actually treat this seriously and put in place the tools to prevent this? Because I'm really, really worried about the trajectory our country is headed in.
In relation to the protection of parliamentarians, I would perhaps like to turn the floor to the RCMP, because there is significant work happening in that space equally. So perhaps we'll start there.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Just to your question, sir, the protective policing has, again, under my program, has a responsibility to protect members of parliament. We do have a minister liaison team that liaises with not only the ministers, but also with the leads of the official parties to discuss any ongoing security concerns. I did find out about this. We are following up on it. It's unacceptable. It's not the first time. I'm well aware of Kidder because it happened here in Ottawa, but we're following up on it to determine what can be done.
What work has been done to investigate the attackers on the Coastal GasLink pipeline?
Well, I can't go into specifics of what we do in an investigation just to ensure that we can protect our methods, but I can say that we certainly do look at these and we use all of our investigative powers.
Are you looking at the attackers on Coastal GasLink? Can you confirm that?
I can't go into specifics of an investigation.
Okay, maybe the RCMP can elaborate. Are you investigating the attacks? Has anyone been arrested?
So I can confirm that the matter is being investigated, but that would be in the provincial side because there's no element right now that would fall under the federal policing mandate.
Okay.
And as for arrests, Madame Dancho, I'd have to follow up because I'm not up to date on that file.
Can CSIS elaborate? Are you aware of anyone's been arrested?
That would not be under us. That would be with the local police of jurisdiction.
Oh, okay, so I'm just to be clear, you're acknowledging that this is a very serious threat. Of course, we know if GasLink pipelines were shut down in the middle of winter, people would literally freeze to death in many cases. It's very one of the greatest threats I think facing our critical infrastructure is our ability to get these carbon-based fuels, these pipelines, making sure that they're protected. So what I'm hearing from you is that both the RCMP and CSIS are not aware if anyone's been arrested as a result of the BC Coastal GasLink pipeline. I find that a bit surprising that you wouldn't even be aware. You could not confirm or deny. It just doesn't seem that you're paying very close attention to it. Do you care to elaborate why you're not aware of whether someone's been arrested?
If that is directed at me,
Go ahead.
Sorry, if that was directed at me, as I mentioned, Madame Dancho, this falls into another wheelhouse. It's not under my program, but I'd be more than happy to follow up with it.
No, I appreciate that, but the CSIS just confirmed, of course, that this is a critical issue facing our country where we should all be very concerned if there are ransomware attacks or further attacks on our pipelines, and I'm not really being reassured that you can't even answer if you know if someone's been arrested, and this was a multi-million-dollar attack on a pipeline. We've seen ransomware attacks on a critical pipeline in the United States. So, CSIS, can you confirm that you're not aware if anyone's been arrested?
So what I would say is that I'm not familiar with the intricacies of what's happening in regards to the police investigation. What we are trying to do is make sure that we can get out there and we're aware of where the ransomware attack is coming from, so we can try and help do some preventive activity and make sure that whatever we learn in those investigations can be shared amongst other critical infrastructure sites so that we can protect and help those protect themselves.
I'm honestly quite shocked that neither the RCMP or CSIS are aware if someone's been arrested in the Coastal GasLink pipeline. I am shocked.
Following up on my colleague, Mr. McGregor's question about attacks on politicians as well as public officials. We've seen attacks on public health officers. Certainly, I know my colleague Michelle Rempel has talked about aggressive attacks on her. I've received threats, and the Prime Minister during the election campaign, and most recently the just horrible attacks that the leader of the NDP experienced in Peterborough. Are there additional steps that the government should be taking to ensure that politicians are, and those in the public eye, are not being subjected to these kinds of threats? I recognize that there's work being done by Parliamentary Protective Services and the RCMP, but it seems like there are many times that it doesn't fall into criminal charges being laid, but it feels like it's a matter of time before this rhetoric and these kinds of aggressive anger turn into something more violent. Perhaps to the RCMP.
So thank you for the question. If I can bring you back to my last appearance before this committee, I'd shared with you some numbers that we looked at during the period of 2019 and 2020. And out of 273 files that met the criteria that we selected for our MVE, there's 145 that never met the threshold. The other ones were investigated or passed on to police jurisdiction. It is a challenge with regards to meeting that threshold. When we do have a file with regards to potential threats, be it online or by a phone or directly, we do engage with PPSC, Public Prosecution Service of Canada, to discuss the file and see if we've met the threshold for these threats. It is a challenge. I can say from an RCMP's perspective, I did mention the minister liaison team is reaching out to all the ministers on a monthly basis, as well as the leaders of the opposition. And I know that the director of PPS, as well as Sergeant at Arms, is doing a lot of work on their front with regards to the members of Parliament.
Sorry to interrupt you because I only have a minute left, but what interaction do you have with the police of jurisdiction? So I know in Halton, when I called, they asked what I wanted to do, and I'm not an expert on policing, and that's not a unique experience. Down in Niagara Region, police refused to investigate an MP's constituency office that was vandalized. So what kind of liaison are you doing with local police services, and should there be more?
We, when there's a complaint or a situation of concern, we do liaise with the police of local jurisdiction. Usually it's through our INSETs, our national security teams, as well as we liaise with the Sergeant at Arms to make sure that he is aware of what's going on.